Now, to make matters worse, her rival, Peninnah, rubbed her nose in it. Now, I want to tell you, you can bust on my shirt, bust on my hairdo, bust on my nose hairs, whatever, bust on my car, but don't point out the most disappointing place in my life, the most painful place in my life, and rub it in. And that's what Peninnah would do. It would be like every year they would go on their family vacation. And Peninnah would say, "Oh, Hannah, you don't have any kids yet. What's wrong? You see all my kids? God must not like you. There must be something wrong with you, Hannah. Come on, why don't you just stay at home and let us have a peaceful family vacation for once?" And it happened year after year after year. Can you imagine the difficulty and the hardship? Then we see that this crushed her spirits, and she would cry and she would fall into a pit of depression and disappointment year after year. And here's the thing I want to point out to you is we have barren situations in our lives. There are times, maybe you're going through one right now. God, I know that there's something in my life you want to give birth to. There's a dream in my life. There's a desire that I know is right. It's just natural, and no matter how hard I pray and I try and I wait and I cry and I talk to other people, I talk to my pastor about it, I go to church and I sing the songs and I read the Bible, I still feel barren. And it doesn't go away year after year. This sense of frustration, and maybe your dream is to have your family come to worship with you week after week, as Elkanah would take his family to the temple year after year, but it doesn't seem to happen. Maybe your dream is to have a spouse, and no matter how hard you pray and try, it doesn't seem to happen. Maybe your dream is to have that besetting habit, that sin that you just can't seem to get over, finally get out of your life so you can walk in victory. Maybe your dream is to have a ministry or to start a business, but whatever it is, you don't have it inside of you to give birth to that thing, and it is embarrassing. You feel like a failure, and those that know you often point it out and question your existence, whether you're in the will of God or not. And it's embarrassing. God often allows barren seasons to come into our life. Next, in barren seasons, we can take action. And we see Hannah doing that here. Notice verse 8. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, "Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" Here's the good husband. He's trying to encourage his wife. He still loves Hannah. Why are you sad? Why aren't you eating? Why aren't you enjoying the vacation here at Shiloh as we worship the Lord? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? And all of his efforts to console her did her no good, but notice what she does. Here in verse 9, and after that, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Notice she rose. She took action. And it's important to contrast what Hannah does here with the priest Eli. He was the spiritual leader of the nation of Israel. But notice that Eli, the priest, what was he doing? He was sitting. He was inactive. He was passive. He was just sitting there. He just given up, idle. Hannah here is the active one. And she goes to the temple in her distress. And we see something here about Hannah in her walk with the Lord. She was not fatalistic. If the fatalistic person says, God is sovereign, He's in control, and I'm in this barren, stinky situation, and I guess this is just my lot in life, so I'm going to give up. That's fatalism. Hannah wasn't there. Hannah was also not bitter with God. God, you did this to me. I'm in this stinky situation. Thanks a lot. I don't want to have anything to do with you. That's not her either. Hannah was a godly woman. And she knew that the Lord had closed her womb. She knew and believed in the sovereignty of God, but she also believed in something else, that God was good, and that God was gracious, and that God was loving, and that God was compassionate. And this same God that was sovereign, that closed her womb, He would be good enough to open her womb. And so she expressed her faith and her trust and her confidence in God. God, you can do something about this. And so she rises and she goes to the temple to pray. And it reminds me of another story in the Old Testament. 1 Chronicles chapter 4. You can read it sometime. Verses 9 through 10. It's the story of a guy named Jabez. You know what the word Jabez means? It means pain. And the Bible tells us that Jabez got his name Pain because his mom birthed him in pain, and she wanted to memorialize that event. And so she said, for the rest of your life, you're going to be called Pain. Can you imagine walking through life and people saying, hey, Pain in the neck, could you go get the ball for me? Pain in the neck, come here, I'd like to talk to you. Hey, Pain, give me a call. Everybody calling you Pain. But the Bible says that Jabez prayed to the Lord. He acted. And he says, oh God, that you would bless me. And oh God, that you would enlarge my borders. And oh God, that your hand would be with me and that you would keep me from evil, that it would not bring me pain. And the Bible tells us this in 1 Chronicles 4:10. God heard his prayer. The Bible says that Jabez became more honorable than all of his brothers. In her prayer, she goes to the temple, she makes a vow, and she says to God, God, if you'll give me a son, I'll give him back to you. He'll be yours, he won't be mine. I want to give him to you, and no razor shall touch his head. And basically what she was saying is he's going to be a Nazirite, which in the Old Testament times was a person especially dedicated for God's service. And they didn't participate in the other things that normal people would do. He would be totally devoted to the work of the Lord. Also, we see here that sitting in barren times leads to spiritual apathy and insensitivity. Notice with me here, we met Eli already, right? What was Eli doing? Hannah was active during her barrenness. She was doing something. Going to the temple. Eli was sitting, the spiritual leader. We're going to see Eli again. I want you to know to notice here what happens with Eli, this supposed spiritual leader of the nation of Israel. Verse 12 through 16, as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. She's praying, she's pouring out her heart, her lips are moving, she's making no sound. Notice what Eli says in verse 14. And Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord. I'm a woman troubled in spirit, and I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my, notice these words, great anxiety and vexation. Here is Eli, and you would think that Eli would know what was going on here. He had been the high priest. He was a seasoned man. He had been the leader of the nation for some time. He was advanced in years, and he should have been at the apex, the zenith of his ability to discern. He had been through these situations many times before, but he fails to see the situation clearly, and he misreads the situation. This girl's pouring out her heart to God, and she's mistaken for a drunken woman.